refuge in God from the rejected devil. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. We're in Surah 67, the kingship, or Al-Mulk. Most exalted is the one in whose hands is all kingship, and he is omnipotent. Well, I have to stop here. The verse says very clearly that in God's is all the kingship. So kingship means that he is the sole and the only authority in this whole universe, and he is also omnipotent according to this verse. We also learn from the Quran that God grants kingship to whomever He wills, and He grants it to the believers. In other words, we know that people who worship God alone and follow God's commandment alone, God promised them that there will be sovereign or kings or queens on earth. In other words, they have everything that they need. Everything that they need will be in their fingertips, without, the headache of a celebrity that we know, needs bodyguards, protection from FBI, or you cannot go to Burger King to eat if you want, because that's the headache of being a celebrity. You have a prison on your own. But God's servant, the believers, have all this and can still enjoy this, and they have anything that they want. And I think that's the biggest, even the most richest, the richest person in the world cannot do that, because they will go everywhere, and everybody, or some people, or some newsman or reporter will follow them. Sam Donaldson will follow them and ask them questions and all that. So the believers don't have that kind of headache. The same goes with the financial problems. They don't need $10 million, but they have everything that they need. They get good transportation, they get anything that they need, good clothing, without being without worrying that the IRS will get into their pocket or something. So all the food that they can eat, that's right, which is what we have today, alhamdulillah. So God grants kingship to whomever He wills, and according to the Quran, that is the believers. Verse 2, the purpose of our life. The one who created death and life for the purpose of distinguishing those among you who would do better. He is the Almighty, the Forgiving. God created the death and life to distinguish the human beings who are the real believers and who are the wishy-washy ones. We all know that the purpose behind creating us here in this life and the whole universe is because billions of years ago we doubted God's supreme authority. In other words, there is one guy who said, well, I can be a God besides God. And we, all the human beings, this is before the creation of the heavens and the earth and our stay here, we don't show our firm stand for God. In other words, we say, well, this guy who was Satan, he may have a point. In other words, let's give him a try, let's test him. So we didn't have a firm stand, as opposed to the angels, for instance, who said that there is no way that anybody except God can rule the universe. So God gave us the second chance to redeem ourselves, and this is because of His mercifulness. God doesn't need to prove anything. He already knew. He knows what's going to happen. There is no future for Him, because as far as He is concerned, everything is past. Everything has taken place. Only He knew. But we need to affirm to ourselves. In other words, on the day of judgment, everybody will see with their own eyes, that this is what they do. That they do not really believe, or they are a real believer. So it is the human beings who needs the affirmations. So there will be no excuses on the day of judgment. And the verse says that He is Almighty, the Forgiving. He is forgiving because even though we committed the blasphemy, we committed a crime that makes us, here in this life right now, He didn't send us outright to hell, but He gave us a second chance. The angel said, of course, at the time when we were created, why do you create? Why did you just send them all to hell? God says, I know what you do not know, because God knows that some of the human beings will be redeemed, and these are the believers. Number 3, He created 7 universes in layers. You do not see any imperfection in the creation by the most gracious. Keep looking. Do you see any flaw? Look again and again. Your eyes will come back stumped and conquered. We adorned the lowest universe with lamps and guarded its borders with projectiles against the devils. We prepared for them a retribution in hell. For those who disbelieve in their Lord, the retribution of Jahannam. What a miserable destiny. When they get thrown therein, they hear its furor as it fumes. Number 8, it almost explodes from rage. Whenever a group is thrown therein, its guard would ask them, "Did you not receive a warner?" And they would answer, "Yes, indeed. A warner did come to us, but we disbelieved and said, 'God did not reveal anything. You are totally astray.'" They also say, "If we heard or understood, we would not be among the dwellers of hell." Thus, they confess their sins. Woe to the dwellers of hell. Verse number 3, we learn from here that our universe is not the only universe that God created. The scientists, the astronomers, is still trying to determine, the limit or the borders of the universe where we live in. And according to God, and this will be proven, inshallah, in the near future, that this universe is only one of the 7 universes that God created.
Be on this side. Because it's going to smash his hand. On this side. There you go. Sorry.
Our universe.
Is it your dad? Okay, go ahead.
Our universe we live in. We live in the a little dot called the planet Earth, which is located in the solar system. We have our own star, which is the sun, and our star is one of the hundreds of thousands of stars in our galaxy, which is the Milky Way galaxy. And our Milky Way galaxy is one of the billions of galaxies in the universe that they stopped counting because they couldn't get the total number. But the universe that we live in, which according to rough calculation is probably about 26 billion light years across, is only the smallest universe. That means that it takes 26 billion years for light to travel. Billions with a B. So that's how awesome is the innermost universe. And there are 6 other universes around the innermost universe, and everything is, all the 7 universes is, according to the Quran, is in God's hand. However, the innermost universe is also, according to verse number 5, is actually the prison cell for Satan, because he cannot go beyond our universe. In Surah 72 verse 9 and also in Surah 15 verse 18, there's the same reference of the guard of the universe, that the jinns and Satan cannot go beyond because they will be pursued by projectiles. But nobody can find any flaw in God's creation. We just look and lay down at a dark night when the moon is very young and look at the stars. I used to do camping a long time ago when I was young, and I always lie down and look at the dark night and look at the stars, and I'm always never cease to amazed how all this can become into being. Our sun is just one of the dim star in the universe, in our universe, which is the Milky Way galaxy, and there are billions of galaxies like that, and yet we cannot imagine how vast is the universe, because until now there is no way that we can even go to our closest neighboring star, and not to mention the neighboring galaxy. Verse 4 says it perfectly. Look again and again, your eyes will come back, stump and conquer. And that's, at least that's my impression when I look at the stars. We also learn from verse 5 that the lowest universe, which is our universe, is adorned with lamps, which is stars. This is we know that lamps is the source of light, and we know that our sun is one of the stars. So what is implied here is probably that only our universe has stars. So we don't know how the outer universes, the second, the third universes look like. We also learn from this surah in verse 7, 8, and 9 is how terrible is the condition in hell. We know that hell is reserved only for those people who go out of their way to reject or deny God's greatness, and therefore, when people go there on their own volition, because despite of all these warnings that God sent through the messengers, through the scriptures, and through all the signs that God manifested to the people, they still insist on going there. And therefore, it's like they already deserve what they get over there. But God explains here how terrible is the condition in hell. It is like hell has its own personality. I mean, hell can be so angry towards the disbelievers, because when the disbelievers were sent there group by group, hell can even sort of talk back to them. Suffer. What do you do? Why didn't you Can I have more? In some other verse in the Quran, hell said, can I have more of these people? Because it's like a very, very savage beast. But hell is simply the absence of God. In other words, these people cannot stand to become close to God, because they did not develop their soul enough in this life, and therefore on the day of judgment they have to run away from God. They couldn't stand the presence of God, and that absence of God is really actually hell. Because in some other verses in the Quran we learn that hell is also described by darkness, by hopelessness, also fire, where people are roasted there and never die and all that. So there is no excuse for the disbelievers when they go there, because they have been warned here, as with the as best allegory as human language can find. As a matter of fact, there would verse 9 we know that disbelievers will. What is the word? They will accept the blame. Yes, indeed, we had a warner, but we disbelieved and said that God did not reveal anything and you are totally astray. And this is exactly what majority of the people will say when one quotes, from the scripture, one is conveying the word of God. They say, we don't believe you. You're far off. I mean, you're strange. So that's what they say in this life, and in the hereafter they will admit that. And they also said in verse 10, if we heard or understood, we would not be among the dwellers of hell. Thus, in verse 11, they actually confess the sins. I think if there's any questions or comments or anything, I'll give it to the forum. Comments or
any questions? As usual, I have a comment on no flaw in the heaven of the sky. We have here this list of prayers, schedule for prayers, an eternal schedule. It is correct forever. You can see in the whole year, sunrise and sunset by the minute. You could have extended to the second and it would be exactly accurate. If you look there at January 1st, the sunrise at a certain time, the sun will rise exactly at that time. The sunset at that time will exactly be at that time. So there is no flaw in God's system. We know exactly when Halley's Comet is going to come back. It comes every 76 years. And sure enough, right on time, there it is coming at the appointed time. Even though Halley's Comet is an aberration, it looks like an aberration in the sky. But it is not. So this is why God says in 4, look again and again, your eyes will come back stumped and conquered. If you are looking for a flaw, you will not find one. And we have shared a demonstration as to how the moon, we see only one side of the moon, even though it is rotating around itself and around the earth. But this movement is synchronized so precisely that if it is off by a fraction of a second, we would see the other side of the moon. We look at poetry describing the moon that is thousands of years old. And they have been looking at the same side of the moon. So this, I just wanted to emphasize that because we have a demonstration right here. The flawless nature of God's creation. So these words of the Quran are flawless as well. Back to the
Verse 12. As for those who reverence their Lord when alone in their privacy, they have attained forgiveness and a great recompense. Before we go to that page, I'll just comment here that it's very important that the belief has to be also subjected to the test of whether we are believing because of the crowd or whether we are believing because of our own conviction. And the majority of the people, if they say they believe, that is because usually this is the norm in the society. In other words, if the norm in the society is that people believe in God, if they don't believe in God, they say openly, I don't believe in God, then they're kind of, like sore fingers sticking out. So they don't want to be in that position. They go along with the crowd, even though in their heart they don't really believe. And this is why the words when alone in their privacy is very important in my opinion, because even when the believer is by himself or by herself, he still observes God. I mean, there is no difference whether he or she is in the group or by himself or herself.
Well, fasting is a good example of that, because fasting is a strictly private deed, and only you have to be a believer in God, because you can drink or eat anywhere where nobody can see, where no human beings can see, only God sees you. So this is a good example.
And that reminds me of a story from some sister who said, when the husband is not there, they say, well, you can eat, you can drink. The husband is not here, But people who said that seriously, they did not realize how deep. It's not just simply something in the outer skin. It is something that a believer has the conviction in their heart. So it's not because of the husband or the wife or the parents or the in-laws that we fast or that we observe God. That's because of our own conviction.
And when a need arises here in this community, the charity fund in the drawer, the people are putting money there and they put it in an envelope and they write the name of the person that it goes to, and it's anonymous. I try very hard to read the handwriting, who's this? But there is no way. I have failed 100% of the time. But the person who's putting money in there anonymously, who sees this person? There's a good number of believers here who believe in God in privacy. Because what is the credit they're getting? They know they're getting the credit from God. And we know that God writes in another place in the Quran that if you give to charity publicly, it is good, but if you give it secretly, it's even better and remits more of your sins. And obviously the people who are doing this, they know that this is the truth. They know that God will give them the credit. There is no reason in the world for them to put money there anonymously, except for knowing that God will give, they get the credit from God. So this is a perfect example of this verse 12.
13. Whether you keep your utterances secret or declare them, He is fully aware of the innermost thoughts. Should He not know created? He is the sublime, most cognizant. This is sort of a rhetorical question. God, who created the heavens and the earth and everything in them, of course He knows everything that He created. He is fully aware of all the creation that He made. I mean, in the Quran, there is even a verse that says, "Not a single leaf falls without Him being, knowing all that." So, if we can count, if it is possible to count how many trees are there in the world, and if it's possible to count how many leaves in every tree, which is impossible for any human being, but God knows every single leaf that falls. That's how far, we cannot imagine how great is God. So we cannot even hide anything from God. The children are usually still very innocent, and they usually, if you talk to them about God, and the best way would be, in my experience, they can lie to you, but we told them that you cannot lie to God. I mean, you can lie to your parents, you can lie, but God will always know. So in the end, they are the one who keeps saying this all the time. God always knows whether we declare anything or we keep it secret. 15. He is the one who put the earth at your surface, roam its corners and eat from His provisions. To Him is the final summoning. I just read the new translation of the Quran, and one of the footnotes, Rashad put the analogy of this earth as a spaceship. So when NASA launches any spaceship, spaceship with 2 or 3 people aboard, they have to calculate exactly how many they're going to be there, so how much food, how much oxygen, how much water they need. Yet these people are celebrities. These people came back from from space for a week or 2 months or whatever, and they came back as celebrities, and everybody knew them. They're out in the newspaper and everything. Yet God sent us in this spaceship Earth, and we are the one who originally committed sin and blasphemy against God, because we were not sure of God's greatness. Yet God gave us this beautiful spaceship Earth with all kinds of provision, not only just food and drink, but also with fuels and all kinds of lakes, mountains, coasts, beaches, and all that. And this is because God is the most gracious. He's trying to give us the second chance, and we have to, and we know from the scripture, from the Quran, that most people will fail to take the second chance. But yet God gives that in advance, and see whether we can appreciate that. Surah verse 15 said, "The earth is put for our surface." Everything in this earth is actually put for our surface. The animals, the metals, the minerals, the fuel that we can get. Anything that we have in this earth is actually created by God for our surface. Yet actually we are, sinners in the beginning to start with. So this comparison makes me wonder, if a little bit of room in the universe, in the space, where this astronaut can cram through, and these are makes them celebrities. What about us? God gives us all this for free, and we actually are not even celebrities. We are,
We don't have to wear space suits, yeah?
Exactly.
We can take a shower in space suit.
Number 16. Have you guaranteed that the one in heaven will not strike the earth and cause it to tumble? Have you guaranteed that the one in heaven will not send upon you a violent storm? Will you then appreciate the value of my warning? Others before them have disbelieved. How terrible was my requital. We know that the earth is such an insignificant mode in God's universe, and everything else that is the universe that God created is actually fits the the palm of God. In other words, everything according to God is in God's hands. So when a human being look at a mountain, it's a huge mountain, and they say this is there is no way that anybody can move this. But God says here that nobody can guarantee that the earth will nothing will happen to the earth. It's very easy for God if He wills to strike the earth wipe out all the disbelievers, cause it to tumble, according to this verse. Have you guaranteed that the one in heaven will not send upon you a violent storm? Verse 17. Until now, the weather prediction or weather forecast is still an art. I met one guy who's finishing his PhD in this atmospheric science in the university, and even he considered. He concedes that weather forecast is still an art. With all the supercomputers that they have, actually, Weather Service is probably one of the biggest agencies that uses supercomputers. They still cannot predict whether it's going to be rain today or tomorrow, even localized area. Not to mention the global weather pattern. It's still a very difficult subject to deal with, and nobody can guarantee whether this place will get rain with certainty. They cannot. We just all we need to do is just watch TV and see the weather forecast and how often they make mistakes. So God can very easily send a violent storm if He wants to. If He decides that somebody needs a shaking up, in this area, then God sends storm there. Also, the storm actually will fertilize the soil. But all these are warning, and we should be able to appreciate that. And we learn from history, and the best history is actually the Quran, because one of the chapters in the Quran is called history, and God says in the Quran that the most important lesson in history when we study, or anybody study history, is that we know why this thing is happening and how to avoid them. In other words, we know consistently that anybody or any group or any society who oppose God and His messenger eventually will be wiped out and eventually will be defeated. So we know that this happens to the groups of people that came before us, and all are recorded in this Word of God. That is, not only we know that it's truth, but we have the proof for it, which is the mathematical composition of it. 19. Have they not seen the birds above them line up in columns and spreading their wings? The most gracious is the one who holds them in the air. He is seer of all things. Here God is talking about the law of aerodynamics. We learned from the khutbah today, which is actually one of the for those who missed the khutbah today, the video program that will be shown starting tomorrow or next week everywhere is a very good example of how a 20th century or 21st century human being can appreciate the facts that have been expounded in a book written 1400 years ago. All this detail about everything that only 50 to 100 years ago some human beings start to learn, it's been in the Quran for 1400 years. And here we know that first of all, the birds fly because God designed them to fly using the shape of their wings and the body. And this kind of shape and principle human beings start to learn, and then they copy it and they make aeroplanes, they make helicopters with the same principle. In other words, how this 100 tons 747, for instance, can take off into the air. Simply because the shape of the wing is such that when you move the object, there will be less density of the air on top of the wing than below the wing, so the whole thing will be lifted. So that's the same design that God has made for the bird's wing. This is the principle of aerodynamics that is not considered well known, but yet all this has been around for millions of years. Have they not seen the birds above them line up in columns and spreading their wings? We know that the formation the birds fly. Again, this is also a principle from aerodynamics. The birds, God teaches the birds to fly in a certain pattern because certain pattern will be the most efficient to reduce the drag. We know that the drag is the biggest challenge for anything that moves in the air, and this kind of formation is now actually being copied by, for instance, if you see the Thunderbirds F-16 from the Air Force, they always fly in a certain pattern because that pattern will reduce, the drag that each particular planes will experience. Most of us probably know the principle when we drive in the interstate. If we drive 70 miles per hour and there's 18-wheelers, 70 miles per hour in front of us, we tend to follow them because we're basically having a reduced drag by following them, and we can conserve more fuel by driving that way. So that's also a principle of aerodynamics, and this is also mentioned in the Quran here. Number 20. Where are those soldiers who can help you against the most gracious? Indeed, the disbelievers are deceived. Who is there to provide for you if he withheld his provision? Indeed, they have.
God is here, fully aware.
So this was a battle in war, and the believers put on a front. They went in there and they were fighting as if they were fighting. But God was doing everything. Now read 57:22. 57:22.
Can I comment on this one?
Sure.
It's very easy to become arrogant. This is a symbolic book, and it's telling to the triumph.
Book, this is what God says.
To the
God doesn't say that.
I agree with you, but you don't let me just to.
You're making a statement that contradicts what God
Didn't
said.
you make a statement?
You said God, this is a symbolic book. It's not a symbolic book. God said this is
Rashad, let me.
a perfect book.
It's a warning to human. We are a very complicated being. And you say, well, if you make that big decision, the rest will be easy.
That's
It's
right.
not.
So the Bible says what the Quran says.
It is not.
So you don't believe God then? You
I
don't
do
what
believe
is
God.
saying.
Please don't put that things on me. I believe in God.
Well, you say
Every
things
time I
that
come to
God
that, you
doesn't
say
say.
that, then you don't believe. What
You don't
do
believe God. God is saying
I do
65.
believe, sir. I'm telling you, I do believe. I'm not lying
You
to
believe
you.
Surah 65 that says if you believe in God, He'll make things easy for you? You
Of
believe
course
that?
it does. I do it. I do things easy for me.
So-
I do things miserable for me. I have a capability. I
Yeah.
have a device. I have a last
You made a
testament.
statement now that things will not go easy for you.
Of course, I can make things miserable for myself. I have an ability. You are denying everything from me. And I'm telling you,
Well, that's
I am
arrogance. This is
able.
what arrogance is.
No. That is not. That's
You
ignorance.
cannot do anything to
I'm
yourself.
not ignorant. I'm telling you, I can be. See, you are very smart, very intelligent, more power to you. But don't tell me. Well, if you make that big decision between Satan and God, the rest of it is easy. It's
So God
downhill.
is saying, this is what God is saying, not me.
I'm telling you, the belief is
Do you
a
believe God
revolving
or
door.
not? Do you believe God?
It's a revolving door.
Okay, do you believe God or not?
Yes, I do.
If you believe God, then you are wrong. Because God says if you make the decision to be with God, things will be easy for you. And the rest will follow.
You know why?
I can show it to you in the Bible, I can show it to you in the Quran.
You know why? Because as a concept is true. The concept
Okay.
is true.
Yeah.
God is almighty. As I was
Okay.
as I was telling
Now we're
this
talking.
gentleman and this when you let's take it one enterprise as an example. Let's take one enterprise. You go to one big company and you are hired under circumstances, under particular circumstances. You are qualified for that job. But if you don't fulfill that expectation, which
Right.
put it to you at the beginning, you are fired, you are failed, and they very graciously will tell you, go somewhere else. This is what we know what is expected from us. God is not going to interfere. He's not fair. He's not going to interfere if I pull a gun on you and say I'm going to kill you. He's not going to interfere in that. If otherwise
You're wrong.
you pull a
You're
gun
wrong.
on me,
You're saying things that Quran doesn't
he's
say.
not going to interfere.
Let Mahmoud say something. Go
Well,
ahead.
this argument is something that at last was going to see it happen over and over. But one thing that I want to ask you is, one thing that you referred to is the fact that we know a lot of things about the Quran and Islam from hearing them, not referencing them directly in the Quran. What I'd like you to say is, whatever you're saying is the belief, to back it up with Quranic verses. Because you are, as you said, you are talking to expect you
To back it up.
Back it up with
No, I'm
verses.
sorry, I can't do it. I cannot even get close to his knowledge, his Quranic knowledge. But I am talking from common sense. That's
No, no.
That is
Doesn't
what I
work that
found.
way.
Just one more
Okay.
minute. That is what I found out when I came in, that a lot of things that I thought was common sense, because I'm someone who do science, I always try to compare everything to some very strong reference, and this is the Word of God. So if you believe in that, then we have the common ground, that this is the Word of God. You believe in God, as everybody else does, but the difference is interpretation. And we have, as I did and I do, a lot of bad things in the system, a lot of things that are hearsay, a lot of things that we have learned has gone to our system, and a lot of intellectual and radical interpretations, which is fine, that's social and economic issues. That's fine, but if I can't back it up with Quranic verses, then I'm not going to get it done, at least literature.
The other side of the coin is, if I cannot back it up and I see something in the Quran, I have to submit to it. You see, we're assuming that all these people here believe that the Quran is the truth. So once I show you something in the Quran, I expect you to say, if this is what God says, I accept it. So if you read Surah 65, verses 3, 4, and 5, and 6, it tells you that if you believe in God, things will be easy for you. God will provide for you once you never expect. If you read the Bible, it will tell you, seek God's kingship over you, and everything else follows. And there are many, many verses I can show you in the Quran. But if you follow common sense and logic, it doesn't work. Robert?
We discuss this because, like you said, it's hard, especially, I don't know, the way I grew up. You learn that you always think you take responsibility for yourself and all these things. But in terms of, you're talking about the one big decision, I had a problem with that because I saw one big decision. Well, how do you know when you make one big decision to choose this or that? Because lots of times, you know, you say, okay, yes, I believe in God, but a second later you're doing something that is contrary to, you know, chronic law or something of that nature. When you make a big decision, you're creating a covenant with God, and you have to uphold. You know, when you choose God, you're not just saying, well, okay, I choose God, everything else is going to follow because God is going to control it. So then I don't have to get up and pray, I don't have to do nothing because, you know, I choose God. But when you choose God, you're choosing to be righteous.
Consequences.
It's a system. You're creating a covenant with God. And all these things that the Quran says for you is to prove to yourself that God is controlling it, controlling everything, that you're on the path to God, like praying and all these things. These are things for us to prove to ourselves that we have made the right decision. And that, as a consequence, because God controls the people who choose to go the other direction too. He says, if you choose to go on Satan's path, he pushes you that way. He controls everything. So all these things like studying, for example, which is totally irrelevant, well, God will provide for us to do certain things. He controls all matters. And like what the dude was saying earlier about studying and not having to worry, he was saying strictly that. You don't have to worry when an exam comes. Not necessarily you don't have to prepare, because God will control that. God will prepare you. You know, God will make sure that you get something done. Like you said, God instills in you the desire to study so that you are prepared. You don't have to worry about it. God will provide for you. God controls all these things on the basis of your covenant with Him. Whether you
It's
choose
the
one way
nature
or
of
another.
human being. I was just saying, it's a peace of mind. If you're worrisome and in disarray, you cannot achieve much. You can go and stay in a library for hours and hours, but your mind is somewhere else. But if you have that mind, that peace of mind, then you can achieve it.
God allows you.
That,
Plus He
I
some
agree
people
with
are
you.
peace of
He's
mind,
almighty,
God, too.
but He's not going to interfere in daily basis.
Yes.
He controls everything. Everything.
If the
Even
vision
the words
never
are
detailed.
saying. And Ali, we're running out of time.
No, I was back in
Thank God He interferes. He does everything in this world. Go
When
ahead,
I was
Ali.
back in Iran, and my dad's side of my family was extremely religious and stuff. And I was always born to believe in God and stuff like that. And at school, they made us pray. They made sure we prayed. And and I always went to it, and sometimes I would just volunteer and try to lead it. And there's a part of the prayer in Iran where you put your hands up like this, and you say some things about Ali and Muhammad. I always forgot that. I couldn't never. I would always skip it. I would remember everything else, but I would skip that because I don't know why. I try to remember. I would tell myself, try to remember at the beginning. I always just skip it, and unless somebody else was leading, but I would go down, and I would do the thing, and if my friend was there or somebody would say, he would say it loudly, so I'd do it. But I always skipped it, and I always.
Well, if you forget it, there is no credit. But if you did it consciously, then there is some credit.
No.
Someone over there told you.
No.
God
If
saved
you do
them
your
from.
prayer so many times.
God told him to forget it?
Absolutely. See, the words you're saying now, it is not
And
even funny. God is doing everything. It's not even funny. Even the words you're uttering, the encounters you have every day.
Right now, I think right now, school and stuff, I'm running for my class presidency. Right now, there are a lot of people more popular than me and stuff. I'm not worried because I know God's on my side, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to work hard. I've been working hard. I'm trying to get posters out. I'm working really hard on my speech. But if I know that God's on my side, I'm not worried. I know that I can win if I work hard with Him on my side. But God will provide the stuff for me, the slogans, how the speech will come.
Douglas.
One of the things we find in the Quran is God says, those who believe and work righteousness. That's a sequence. You cannot work righteousness unless you believe. A person can think they believe. The Quran says, have you not seen those who follow their own opinions? The Quran speaks of human beings who think they have guidance, who think they have knowledge, when in fact they don't. And all of us have at one time or another felt we've known something or we know what to do in a situation. That sequence throughout the Quran, those who believe and work righteousness, one of the things that it points out is that it is Allah's will, it is God's will that we work the righteousness, that He guides us to work the righteousness. We cannot do it on our own. So to use the example of studying for the exam, a person who truly believes knows what God says in the Quran, that you must be responsible for your own actions in that sense, and they will take that step. See? So that sequence is very crucial. Those who believe and work righteousness.
Just
also that God will test you daily, and every time that you said something, you say things go miserable for you. Isn't that also a test? When you're miserable, didn't you kind of fail a test? Because you'd be happy if you didn't, and you truly believed in God, because it makes things easier. I mean, God was what gives me today. He just gave me a job today by having myself, and I've just been accepting things as they come along lately. Things become a lot easier. Because before I argue with things, and when you argue with things, you're arguing with God, trying to get you for it.
I agree basically what they say, but they still believe in God. There are some rapes, there are some child abuse. God is not going to interfere. The guy who abuses, the guy who misleads, the guy who represents himself
there's something missing
has
here.
to.
The rapes and the murders and all these are in Satan's word, not in God's.
The last revelation is here and says you have to pay the consequences. It's here. He's not going to come down, or the whatever the gen or whatever is not going to come and hold my hand, say, hey, not to steal things. I'm going to steal it if I decide, if I choose to be a thief. Then I have to pay the price.
You're making a decision to break God's law. You're making a decision to be in Satan's
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying if the speaker is bad, I have to either hire someone to fix it in advance because I have it up here.
No.
I know it's not working.
No.
Or
God will send His angels to fix your stomach or your heart or your car or your speakers.
And the wife.
I have a question about verse 20, please. Going back to verse 20, Surah 67. Page 563. It's about the invisible soldiers that you mentioned, the gems or the angels, the believers, or the disbelievers are fighting the believers, even though the number of believers may be 10, 100 times higher than the soldiers. The disbelievers, but mostly
The believers always win.
yeah, that's right. The believers always win.
Yep.
And you mentioned about invisible soldiers. Does this mean that we do not see the invisible soldiers, that they do not exist physically, or do they take the gun and they shoot, or this invisible soldier, what God meant was again that sacrifice, determination, hard fighting, not be afraid of anything, just in the front line?
No, Hassan, they are mentioned in the Quran several times. Invisible soldiers mean soldiers you cannot see. They're right in this room, but you cannot see them.
How do they
They're
fight
very
it?
physical, because they can carry this mask and turn it upside down. How physical can you get?
They have never done it anywhere in the whole universe.
They didn't do it.
And
to
you
us.
are putting it what
Sodom
God
and
can
Gomorrah.
destroy this, but have they ever done it?
Yes.
Of course. You know it in the
Sodom and
Quran.
Not
Gomorrah,
after the
Quran.
last revelation, because Jesus said it, this is it.
Read my lips,
Let me-
read
let
my
me-
lips. The angels turned Sodom upside down, the city.
Yeah, did I just tell you after the Prophet Muhammad, he said this is it? Now you have everything in your hand.
I don't
Before
understand.
that, people asked prophets, we want some proof, like miracle.
Yes.
And Moses threw his stick and became a whatever and
Yes.
opened, because people were not sophisticated. They were not at the higher echelon. Now we are. We are in a
We have a miracle right now.
enlightenment era.
Yes.
The whole.
So what is
one-
your point?
if you're not getting it, I'm sorry. I'm saying this is it. It says the
That's what we're saying, but
consequences.
you're not following it. You don't
No,
believe
you're
it.
saying, well, if you make that big decision, God will come and turn the TV for me. If I say, well, listen,
Yes,
my
fine.
legs are broken. And this guy
They
said,
will
well,
not
go
break
and
to
get
start
grab
with.
it.
If you believe in God, they will not break to
I
start
do
with.
believe in God, sir.
I gave you a list.
But I also believe in my intelligence.
See, the Quran
Our
says
teacher, go ahead.
the Quran says that we have to kill our ego, because that is usually the last idol.
What that has
So-
to do with the price of tea in China.
I'm saying that-
talking about I said, please believe in yourself. God will guide
No,
you.
believe in God, not believe in yourself. You believe in God.
Your
Yeah,
ability,
that's your ego.
God put it in you. You supposedly.
See, Moses were commanded by God to tell his people to kill their ego, because the ego is the last idol. We can say we believe in God. Millions of people who believe in God will not make it, because they still have something hanging there, the stumbling block, and the last stumbling block is the ego. If we cannot accept the word of God, as it says in
Everything
the
you do
Quran,
consciously, it will count, good or bad. It will count again for you or against you. It will credit it in you and nothing, not to your neighbor, not your brother or father. It's your own account. But if you don't do it unconsciously, there is no credit. If I pray, if I'm a good Muslim because my father told me so, there's no credit for me. But if I come to the senses that there is such a religion and tells you this, and I come to the decision and got to the point, then there is some credit at the end of the line.
Right,
But you have to make a decision. You have it's a revolving door. It's just a revolving
in
door.
the Quran, God says He misguides those who He pleases and guides those who He pleases. So then, on the consequence of what you just said, from your own common sense, if God guides who He pleases and misguides who He pleases, that's in the Quran.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's absolutely
So
correct.
then, you can
Not in daily basis.
So then you can throw conscious and common sense right out the window, in a sense. Now, except the fact that everything in the Quran and everything does make sense. That's how God has made it for us.
Right.
The whole fact that we don't believe that God had His only begotten Son and sent Him onto this earth, all these things that don't make sense, 3 people in one, and all this other stuff, that we just believe in God alone, that's all part of common sense. The fact that there's no contradictions in the Quran with science, that it's a perfect book. I mean, this is all part of common sense. But when you're talking about, like, one big decision, it's whole bunches of decisions, little decisions, which constitute one big decision, whether you believe in God or not. That's what I was talking about in the covenant, with your covenant with God. Like when you're talking about praying or not praying, that's a decision whether you're choosing God or Satan. That's all part of that one big decision. So it comes up time and time and time again. But that's the only thing that matters. Whether you tell your employees, look here, this has to be done in 1 month or not, and they get kicked out. That doesn't make any difference.
See, God is fair and
Because He
just.
controls all that.
If you are fool enough to go on the roof and then fall down, He's not going to do anything. He's not going to interfere. If I survive the accident, there is some explanation,
Well,
physical explanation.
Here's another thing from the
It's not
Bible.
that
It
God
says you
picked
shouldn't
me
test.
up.
There's no need to test God. You shouldn't test, like in the Bible. I don't know if this isn't in the Quran, but there's a verse where Jesus is on the top of the mountain, and the devil says, "Well, if you're truly a messenger of God, well then cast yourself down upon these rocks, because it says that His angels will save you." And Jesus says, "You
Well,
should
this is
test
a
that
new
Lord,
era.
that
Yeah,
God."
don't test God. Yes.
So
Our teacher next
it's
week
hard to
is
be
Douglas.
righteous.
Douglas Brown. We're going to read the Fatiha for Ali to help him with his school and something that he requested the Fatiha for. And lucky Farhad Moaini, he gets his birthday in the middle of the week, so we can give him 2 Fatihas. So we're going to pray to God again to give him and his family a great happy year coming up and happier years after that. Fatiha. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Congratulations. Surah 68 next week, inshallah.